welcome you all to Trek Wars.
So today on Trek Wars, we'll be taking a look at the Dominion fleets, the Federation fleet, and we'll talk about the ideas behind the fleets, and we'll also be discussing what advantages and disadvantages the fleet dynamics have. And we'll have a special emphasis on the idea that you should take Federation fleets and put them together with ships of the same ages. And I will put a constructive argument of why the Federation should not do this. So some of the arguments is that we should be having older ships with older ships and newer ships with newer ships, mostly because the older ships will keep the newer ships behind, because though they usually have similar warp speeds, the amount of time that an older ship can stay at high levels of warp speed is significantly less than that of modern starships. So this is the main concern that I hear about. Now, there are some dynamics to these changes and these fleet doctrines that I will discuss here in a little bit. But before we continue, let's learn about the Dominion fleet, which actually uses this composition, and we'll discuss why it's more effective for them than it would be for the Federation. So one of the advantages that the Dominion have that the other races do not have is that the Dominion actually have the most advanced ship construction rate of any of the minor races. Another thing to take in consideration is that they don't have the limitations of population, because they can grow their own crew. They can make the ships as fast as they can, and they're expendable. This is the major difference between any of the other major powers, is the Dominion ships are designed for mass production and they're always expendable. The only exception to this is the Jem'Hadar battle cruiser. This is the only ship that is not viewed as expendable. The Jem'Hadar cruisers, the Jem'Hadar fighters, all these things are expendable. Now, Cardassian doctrine is completely different than the Dominion. Their ships and their population are not expendable. Their ships are reinforced with extremely powerful hulls, but the ships lack a lot of the advanced technology that the other races have. Their shielding is inferior, their firepower is inferior, their sensors are inferior. Just about everything about the Cardassians is inferior to the major powers. In order to compensate for this weakness, the Cardassians were forced to take a doctrine where they were building the most advanced ship they could and making the most of them. So what they had done is they had created the Galor, and the Galor became their standardized warship. And this standardized warship, Galor, became the all-purpose starship. So in order to compensate for this, they began mass production of a medium cruiser, which is the Galor. And there's Type 1, there's Type 2, and Type 3. And they just continue to upgrade this ship as much as they can. Now, one of the advantages of having a standardized fleet is construction and repair is significantly faster because you are using the same parts. But there's obviously the weakness that once the enemy realizes the weakness of the Galor, they can take advantage of that weakness. So the Galor's fighting potential is a medium class cruiser. It is not an all-purpose warship, but it's treated that way. But because of its limitations in technology, the Galor would typically move in groups of 3 if it's expecting to engage a larger ship like a Galaxy class or a Nebula. These ships are not capable of taking on most of the major powers' ships on a one-on-one basis. Their technology level is more equivalent to Federation starships during the Kirk era. Their shielding is poor. Their only real advantage is this extremely powerful hull. Everything else is subpar. The only actual weapon that this ship carries is one heavy spiral wave disruptor cannon located in the front of the ship, which is boasting modern firepower. So this ship is not really as dangerous as you would think it should be. But because of the limitations of technology, this was the best that the Cardassians can do. And this is why Cardassians move in groups of 3. Is they are putting in offsets for the fact that their ships are seriously lacking and cannot operate on a one-on-one battle. So, with that being said, let's discuss this fleet composition. Because of the weakness of the Galor can take a decent beating, so it's there to soak up fire. The Jem'Hadar fighters are there to deliver the actual firepower, and the Cardassian cruisers are there to soak up fire. They can take a decent amount of damage because of their powerful hull. Now, the Jem'Hadar cruisers are to sit in the back and are to instruct the fleet on what to do. That's why the commanders are inside the cruisers, and the cruisers are far superior to anything else in the fleet. So the Cardassians are basically being used as fodder. They're there to take up large amounts of damage to protect the Dominion assets, which are the cruisers. So they are putting themselves in the middle of the fleet in order to soak up as much damage as they can. Alright, so now we're going to talk about Federation dynamics and their fleet compositions and why they were set up the way they were, and why we wouldn't want to keep old ships with old ships and new ships with new ships. Now, the argument at first glance sounds pretty sound. So you don't want ships that are fast, not able to use that speed to their advantage. So you want to keep faster ships with faster ships, would be newer models, and older ships with older ships. Now, there is a huge disadvantage to this, though, is if you have a fleet that is full of old ships that don't have modern technology, they are going to get blown up and destroyed quickly in a combat situation. While the newer ships are going to be able to hold their own, this is going to cause a situation where the Dominion will immediately notice this once the actual battle begins, and they will focus out those weaker fleets and they will destroy them. Once those weaker ships are been destroyed, what will happen is the Dominion will then turn those fleets onto that more powerful, superior fleet that the Federation has with the new modern ships. This is a terrible idea for this reason. This is going to make it so you're going to be putting yourself in a position where you can be hammered and anviled. This is a terrible, terrible doctrine and a terrible way to use your fleet dynamics. Now, if you decide to mix new and old ships, there will be a huge advantage that the Federation will have, because the Federation has more different ship types than any other race out there, and it actually is a huge advantage. Now, when it comes to production, it is a negative. When it comes to repairing, it's a negative. But when it comes to actual combat, having so many different ships that the enemy never knows what the Federation fleet composition looks like or how strong it is a technological advantage, because the enemy can never prepare for the fleet that's coming. It'll never really know what it has or what it can do. So let's just kind of think about some of the most common ships in the Federation lineup. Now, remember, these sizes are not comparable to what is actually on screen. They're just here to show you guys what I'm discussing. So you can see that there are several different ship types in here which are pretty common in the Federation fleets, and they have wildly different offenses and defense capabilities. Now, besides the fact that there are so many different variants of ships, and each type of ship is its own class and has its own advantages and disadvantages. So for an example, the Steam Runner is extremely powerful and can take a huge amount of damage, though its output is average. And on the Galaxy class side, it's able to take a good amount of defense, and its offenses are incredibly good. And then you look at the Akira. The Akira has the best of all things. So this is something to take in consideration. And then obviously you have the Defiant. The Defiant has got the best of all worlds, and it's a little tiny ship. So it's really hard to understand ship dynamics and fleet composition because of so many different variables that your fleet can have. And now we're going to discuss one more variable. One of the most common ships seen in the Federation is the old Excelsior class. Now, the reason why this ship is such a variable is the ship is so old and so common that many Starfleet admirals have chosen to use this ship as their flagship and have upgraded it. So you don't know what you're getting. So what I mean by that is there are so many different variants of this ship that you don't ever really know what Excelsior you're fighting against. Are you fighting against an Excelsior that has Type 9 phasers, which are hitting you for around 20,000? Or is this an older variant that hasn't been fully upgraded and it just has Type 8 phasers, which are hitting for you for 13,750? Or has this been modified for full-on combat? Is this hitting with Type 10 phasers? Now, the shielding is the same way. Is it an older shield? Is it a newer shield? So there are so many variables about Federation starships and them being upgraded. The Federation upgrades a lot of their ships and keeps them running and going longer than other races do. A lot of other races will just create a new design and then replace the whole fleet. This is not really something the Federation does. The Federation will keep ships going for hundreds of years and will continue to upgrade them and create them. So even now, the Federation was still building Excelsior-class starships right before the Dominion War and during the Dominion War. And so you don't know what ship you're fighting against. So if you're in a position like the Dominion, and you come in and you're expecting to be attacking an Excelsior class starship and you expect it to be fighting with Type 8 phasers because it's an older target, and then you realize that this ship has been upgraded and now you're fighting a ship which is basically a small Galaxy class, this will completely change the dynamics of that combat situation once you have engaged the fleet. So if you're the Dominion and you're attacking a Federation fleet, you never know what the Federation fleet is going to be able to do if it has a mixture of new and old ships. It'll be able to hold the line far superior, far longer than if it was just old ships and then new ships. Having a mixture of ships makes there a certain level of inconsistency with the fleets that would make it that your enemy has to always be thinking twice about what it's doing. Where is the real threat coming from? Is Fleet 1 the superior fleet? Is Fleet 2 the superior fleet? Or is Fleet 3? And you're not really going to know because you could do things like have a fleet which all the Excelsiors are all modern Excelsiors with Type 10 phasers, and that fleet is actually going to be able to destroy the Jem'Hadar fleet much faster than if it was using a bunch of Type 8 phasers. So the major advantage to this is if you're in a situation where you do get the ability to trick them and they do fall for this, that means that you could destroy one of the fleets and then you could wrap around and then attack another fleet with the remaining ships of your fleet because it surprised them and the ships in that fleet were modified, more than they normally are, and it could surprise that Cardassian or Jem'Hadar fleet, and then you could cause what we refer to as the hammer and anvil. And so that will give you the opportunity to be hitting another fleet and then hitting it from the front and the back, which will cause a major collapsing in their defensive capabilities. So with this dynamic that I just showed you, you're going to have a fleet with Galaxies, Akiras, and different ships all mixed together. But the Excelsiors in this top fleet were actually modified with Type 10 phasers like the Lakota. And so they were hitting way above their normal average, which could be an offset for that fleet that's trying to deal with this ship, not expecting that. So they could reallocate their resources to try to take out another ship and then find out that they're flanked because those Excelsiors are actually using Type 10 phasers and they should have been a primary target and they weren't. But by the time you figured out what you had done, it's too late, and you focused on the ambassadors, and now the Excelsiors have destroyed your incoming Jem'Hadar fighters. So the amount of tactics and flexibility you get from being able to use a doctrine like this by mixing the ships, in my opinion, would outweigh the negative of the fleet being slower. Now, it would be slower, but it would be far stronger. So your choice is you can have speed or you can have strength. And when you're fighting an enemy like the Jem'Hadar, which are able to outnumber you, you're going to want to have a fleet that is actually stronger and able to take that collision rather than focusing on little skirmishes. Federation starships are not really particularly great at small skirmishes. This is something that's better suited for Romulans and Klingon ships, which have cloaking devices. They can skirmish the enemy while the Federation is taking the brunt of the attack. When you do a comparative analysis on the ships, you can see that Klingon ships are basically skirmishers, and you can see it's the same thing with the Romulans. So a lot of their weapons are short range, and they need that cloaking device to get close. Now the Federation has the ability to hit you from long range with a significant amount of torpedo fire, and then also their phasers are superior than most weapons. So they have several advantages. Their phasers can shoot further than Jem'Hadar pull-around beam weapons. Their torpedoes are equivalent to the Jem'Hadar, but their torpedo modules are stronger. So they can get more torpedoes in the battlefield than the other races. So they want to fight from a distance, and they want to tank. The Federation are basically tanks. Their shields are better than most of the other races. Most of their ships are well shielded. And their armor on their ships is lacking. But for the most part, most of their ships have good shielding, which can hold out for a while and can keep them in the fight for a decent amount of time. So they're able to tank and fire from long range. That is their primary goal in the fleet. Now, the Romulans can tank as well once they get into the fight, but one of the limitations to the Warbird is the fact that its disruptors are short range, so they have to get in close, which is a huge disadvantage in a large-scale battle, because where the Federation can help another ship at distance, the Romulans are somewhat limited in that fashion. They do have torpedoes, but their disruptors are basically their primary weapon, and torpedoes are more of an afterthought. And this same kind of disadvantage is seen with the Klingon weapons as well, because Klingon disruptors are shorter range than Federation phasers, but some of the some of the Klingon ships do have a decent amount of torpedoes, and they can give better range superiority attack. But for the most part, when you think about the major empires as a whole and its units working together, the primary use of the Romulan Warbird is for skirmishing. It's also used as a tank in large-scale battles, but it has limitations to short range. Now, the Klingons also have the limitation of short range, but they're really good skirmishers, and they do have some fire support. Now, as far as tanking go, their ships don't seem to be as much of a tank as the Federation or the Romulans, so I don't really put them in that category. Their primary goal is for skirmishing and then fire support, because some of their ships are loaded with a lot of weaponry. Now, the Federation, on the other hand, their primary goal is tank, fire support, and then being long-range specialists. So they have the torpedoes that the other races don't have. So you can see some races have some strengths and some have some weaknesses. Like, for an example, the Romulans have a lot of large battleships. They're good for tanking, and they can take a lot of damage, but their fleet size isn't that large. And then on the other hand, the Klingons, they don't have any really large ships. They do have some cruisers, but they don't have anything that's monstrous and they can actually take massive amounts of tank capabilities like you see with the Federation and the Romulan Warbird. The best that they have is, a cruiser. Their cruisers are generally pretty good for a ship of its size. It definitely hits above its level, but it's not a battleship. Now, on the other hand, they have a lot of ships with a lot of firepower. So they're small birds of prey, though they're not carrying that many weapons. Their weapons are pretty high-level calibers. They're able to fight. They're able to shoot. They have, good volleys, and they can bring a lot of damage to the battlefield. Now, the Federation, on the other hand, is like the jack of all trades, basically, except for they are really lacking in skirmishers because they don't use cloaking devices. So they're limited on their ability to do actual skirmish battles because you can always see a Federation ship coming. There's very few ships that are in the fleet that operate like the Centaur, where they're hard to attack and they almost move as if they have some kind of cloaking field. And then just so you guys understand, I'm not talking about a cloaking device. I'm saying they're using some kind of stealth technology. So the Centaur is basically the only Federation starship that I'm aware of that has this ability, though there might be others. But it says it's very hard to detect the Centaur, and the Centaur basically could be a skirmisher because it can get into the enemy space undetected, do its job, hit, and get out. But I don't think it's a fantastic ship for doing something like this. So imagine a Dominion fleet going after one fleet, realizing, oh, there's a lot of new ships, and then it turns to engage an older fleet, thinking that it's going to get an easy kill. So this fleet goes to engage the weaker fleet to try to take it out before the other fleet can rendezvous. And then they're thinking they're going to get an easy kill. But what they don't know is these ambassador classes are been upgraded, and they're fighting at almost a Galaxy class level. And then on top of that, the Excelsiors in this fleet, what if they were modified and they're using Type 10 phasers and they're operating at a Galaxy class level almost as well, like the Lakota. So then you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 starships that are almost a Galaxy class level. So though you may win this battle still, the amount of casualties will be far worse than what you originally prospected, and this could damage the overall fleet mechanics. So this constant having to think twice and then worrying about if you're going to be ambushed, if you're going to be tricked, what are you going to do? This is going to make fighting the Federation very, very difficult and very taxing on the tacticians, because you will always constantly have to be modifying your tactics to the flexibility of the Federation fleets because they have so much modularity. They can modify and they can be modular with so many different ships that you don't know what you're fighting. I think this is far more superior in a tactical situation than just having some fleets that are faster than others. I don't think that that's going to do as much for you as the flexibility of your enemy never knowing what you have. Think about it like this. Imagine you're playing poker, but you can see the hand of your enemy, right? But they can't see yours. They're never going to know exactly what's in your hand. This is the advantage that you have with this kind of modularity. I think modularity is a better tactic than speed fighting this enemy. I hope that you've seen that modularity can be a strength of its own. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Please make a comment. Let me know what you think. I'd be curious how you guys feel. And I just want to let you guys know that if you like these kind of videos and you want to see me grow and go, please subscribe. It makes a difference, and making a comment, it helps the algorithm gods. With that being said, may the force be with you. No, I'm just kidding. Live long and prosper. Thank you for watching Trek Wars. If you like this material, please subscribe and make a comment. And with that being said, victory is life.